Let's talk about Boo Carter. Tennessee gets a commitments, star in-state athlete, been after him for a long, long time. Safety, nickelback, but he can play a little bit all over. But he jumps in the boat, makes his announcements to Tennessee on Saturday night. AP, a one that Tennessee needed to have, and finally he jumps in.
Yeah, and a big get. Boo is one that's a catalyst for other recruits. Doesn't mean that everybody's going to go, oh, Boo's there, and I'm just going to fall in line. That's not how it works. But other kids gravitate towards him. Again, his name is Boo, and there's a certain cachet, certain swag that he carries himself with. And I think kids are like, ooh, this kid's name's Boo. This is awesome. And then they see kind of like how he maneuvers and operates and stuff. And kids love it. And, so I think that, he has an impact. Again, it doesn't mean kids are just going to just fall in line and commit because Boo did. But at the same time, there is a certain magnetism about him with other players that gets him interested in Tennessee. And so he'll be here this weekend for an OV, Matt, and having him around Mike Matthews, having him around Amari Jefferson, having him around all the other players that are in town, I think it's a big deal.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've touched on it a little bit, but, Mike Matthews and Boo Carter, they go way back to the AAU basketball scene when they were coming up, a little bit of competitive friendship, if you will. They kind of decided they were geared the same way, and that sparked a friendship. And I just think Boo Carter is that guy that's not afraid to say, hey, what are you waiting on? Come to Tennessee. And I think that's something this class needs, and he's the guy that's going to do that. He's so well known because he's traveled, he's played 7-on-7 with everybody, he talks to everybody, he has a good time. Like AP said, his name's Boo. So everybody knows him. And then he's not hurting in the real name department either. Boo is the nickname. Orlando is the first name. So, I mean, he's got two of the best names that you could have out there. But just a guy that I think can do a lot of different things for Tennessee in the secondary. And I think a lot of it comes down to what he can do in a short area. You put him in a box as a nickel cornerback or a safety. Within those short areas, he does so much, and he's just really tough. There was a camp about this time last year where I think everybody thought he was going to come up and just play offense strictly. He did play some offense, but he played defense, and he absolutely just shut guys down all camp long. So that kind of led to Tennessee pursuing him on the defensive side of the football. But for Tennessee, it's a big win to get Boo Carter in the class.
His quote to you. As you called me and said, there's a lot of guys that say that, school X is getting a dog. He had a breed of dog.
He had a breed of dog. Yeah.
I mean, that means he's thought about it. Yeah. I mean, like that means to me, like again, like and I think it's a good comparison because he does play with a competitiveness that is just intense, and Lockwilders are intense.
Matt, you were talking about, Boo Carter being a guy that says, hey, what are you doing? Let's go. Come to Tennessee. Like, what are you waiting on? Edwin Spillman, could be on the receiving end of that text message or that phone call.
Well, it was from the 40-40 Club. He FaceTimed him.
From the 40-40 Club, he FaceTimed. Yeah.
There you go. Well, plans already in motion. Edwin Spillman back on campus this week. Matt, how did it go, and how much closer is Tennessee before he finally makes a decision?
Yeah, I think Edwin Spillman's continued to take things in stride in his recruitment. But again, Tennessee's been in this thing for the long haul, and what we've said for a little while, it's hard to envision Edwin Spillman somewhere other than Tennessee. I think he continues to connect really well with these guys, and I think we see him, make a decision sometime after everything wraps up here in June, probably early July. And it's still, again, anything can happen in recruiting, but it's hard to see Edwin Spillman somewhere other than Tennessee.
Austin, you and I talked about this a little bit on Sunday. I think he's a little bit caught up in the fact that he believes everybody assumes he's going to Tennessee. Yep. How much is that slowing things down? How much is that a concern to Tennessee? Do they have to recruit him differently? But because he's got a little bit of that mindset, he clearly likes Ohio State, right? Now, he's got all the variables that make the most sense to Tennessee. but he's always had a bit of an affinity for Ohio State, going back to before he ever really started getting recruited. How much does Tennessee have to make sure that Edwin Spillman is being recruited as Edwin Spillman and not one of the Spillman brothers?
I think that's the biggest hang up here. I've said that. If you're Josh Heupel, like, you don't like it when everybody just assumes you're going to run back to Oklahoma if that job comes open. So, Edwin Spillman doesn't just like it that everybody just assumes he's going to Tennessee because older brother Nathan's there. And so, I think, you got to recruit Edwin for Edwin. I think Tennessee's done that. I think he and Brian Jean-Marie are really, really tight. I think we're nearing the end of this thing. And, I think Matt's right. I think this is he's going to pray about it. He's going to go on a little bit of a trip with some buddies. And after that, I think he'll be ready to announce.
All right, guys. So it was Saturday morning. I was at McGee Tyson Airport waiting on my tin can that was 12, 13 rows to take me to Chicago to get on my connector and over here to Omaha. I'm waiting on this flight to come in from Chicago, seeing everybody get off the plane, and Inston's in a 6'6", 333-pounder wearing Chicago Bears stuff. It was obviously Darnell Wright. Makes a whole lot of sense because his new home is Chicago, coming in this weekend for whatever, but also spent some time with a Tennessee target in Daniel Calhoun. Daniel Calhoun, AP, this weekend. How did Tennessee fare there, and how much of an influence was having Darnell Wright on campus?
Well, I think Tennessee did a really nice job, having some former players in town. But Darnell Wright was one of them, and for Daniel Calhoun being able to talk to a guy who got drafted in the top 10 is a big deal. And I thought Tennessee showed really well with Daniel Calhoun this weekend. And I think Georgia and Alabama were ahead of the Vols before this past weekend. I would no longer say that's the case. Again, right now, like I'm kind of, I feel like Tennessee's in a pretty good spot there leaving the weekend. But, going to go to Texas this weekend. They're a team you have to watch out for. The question is are they okay, going that far away from home, or would he rather stay in this part of the country to play in the league? He's going to be playing in the league regardless because Texas is coming into it. But, I'm really interested to kind of see what his thoughts are leaving that Texas visit with one visit to go.
Yeah. I don't feel like maybe I'm wrong here, Matt, and Austin, jump in there. You guys know this better than me. I don't want to say the Texas visit's a wasted visit because he's been there before, but this feels like it's Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee kind of as the three to me. Am I wrong in feeling that way? That's kind of my takeaway. Maybe it's because he's been to those three places so many times compared to some of the others.
Well, I don't think you can discount Texas. Okay. I think that the distance plays a factor. The question is how much of a factor does it play? And so, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but at the same time, I don't think it's just a token visit. I think Texas has a legitimate shot. Are they behind the other teams? I do believe that's the case. But, I said Tennessee was behind Georgia and Alabama before last weekend, and, they've made a push here. And so, again, like the biggest thing for Calhoun is like, I know he's, on our, we have him listed as the interior offensive lineman. I think that's what he is. I think he's a mauler guard. Could he play right tackle? Maybe, but I think he is just a specimen, especially once he gets in a nutrition program and a weight program. He's, 350 plus pounds. And once he trims off some of that baby fat and gets in a real weight program, I think will look even better.
Well, I think we kind of touched on it a couple of times. Like, why does Daniel Calhoun, keep coming back to Tennessee's campus? And the more you talk to people and the more you get to learn a little bit about Daniel Calhoun and his family, they're pretty diligent in the process. They're really taking this thing in stride. Alabama and Georgia have been in a really good spot, as we've alluded to, for a while. Tennessee made a good push this weekend. But I'm right there with Austin. I think, you can't discount Texas in this one. Are they behind? Yeah, they're behind going into the weekend. But just like, Tennessee, they're going to get their shot. And we'll see where things are for Daniel Calhoun. I do think, Eric, back to your first point, that it was a pretty smart play by Tennessee to connect him with Darnell Wright because there's some similarities there. Two highly ranked guys that are physical specimens. But both needed, when Darnell got here, needed to get in a little bit better shape, had some things to clean up. He'll be the first guy to tell you that. Daniel Calhoun will be the first guy to tell you that he needs to trim up. He needs to get in a little bit better shape. So I think, to not only be able to connect with a guy that was just a top 10 pick, but also a guy that already has gone through what you are self-aware that you're going to go through when you get to a college program is, a good talking point during the weekend.
Matt, let's stay with you, man. Can't mention one without the other when talking about the defensive line. Williams, Nwaneri, 5-star, number 1 rated defensive player per on 3 in the class. And of course, Kamarion Franklin, both those guys on campus, both those guys spending time with Rodney Garner. How did they fare?
I'll defer to AP for Cam Franklin because I didn't talk to him, but did talk to Williams Nwaneri, and he's a tough read. But, I mean, to say the least, he's a tough read. But still kind of feels like where things were. Tennessee had a good weekend with Williams Nwaneri. I think he had productive conversations with Mike Eckler and the Tennessee coaching staff. He really liked what they, broke down for him from a football standpoint. The interesting thing to me with Williams Nwaneri in talking to him was what was your favorite parts of the trip? What did you enjoy? None of it was the flashy stuff. None of it was the photo shoot, hanging out in Neyland Stadium. Hey, what did you enjoy? I enjoyed seeing how Tennessee could use me. He liked it. They talked to him about the Leo position, the fact that he could play interior in certain situations, the fact that he can do so many different things for this defense. I think that is something that stood out to him. And I don't know where his conversations have been during other visits, but I think Tennessee really did well on the football side of things this weekend with him. Now, I asked him a couple of different times when I talked to him, do you really think this thing's going to September? He seemed pretty adamant that it would. He really wants to take that trip to Oregon. Now, does that get moved up? Possibly. Does he need to see Oregon again to make a decision? Once things go dead in July, how does he, kind of work through everything there? I still think there's a chance he could decide before September, but I've told AP this. I've talked to other folks that feel the same way. If it goes to September with Williams Nwaneri, I think all bets are off. If he decides in July, I think Tennessee has a really good chance.
Yeah, I can't dispute that. I will say this: Nwaneri, as Matt said, is a tough read. Like I think he's the kind of guy that is going to have the same expression on his wedding day, when his first kid's you're never going to. He can have the time of his life. You're never going to know it. You're never going to be able to read it. As far as Cam Franklin, a little more smiles, but those guys are similar personality-wise, which is why, Nwaneri told Matt he liked hanging out with Cam Franklin. Very similar personalities, kind of low-key, reserved. I think Tennessee did well with Cam Franklin this weekend. Again, when does he do something? He's talking about going to Auburn in September for a visit. The longer this plays out, to me, it's harder to maintain momentum. Right now, I think Tennessee has the momentum with Cam. But what does that momentum look like in late July, in late August, in mid-September? And, I think that's kind of one of those things where, I think Ole Miss is a factor. I think Miami's a factor. And I think Auburn's a factor. I think those are the 4 teams. And, Ole Miss is going to take a swing because of the in-state school right down the road. Miami is Miami. And Auburn is Auburn. And so, I think it's one of those things, like, as Matt said with Williams, Cam cancel that LSU visit. To me, that's interesting. Was that Cam canceling the visit, or was that LSU saying, this thing's going to go a while? We're better to shoot our shot in season than shoot it right now. That's my real question. And that's one question I'm going to see if I can figure out over the next couple of days was this a Cam decision or an LSU decision? Because if it's a Cam decision, then I think that's a really good sign for the Vols.
Well, and then, we talk about Daniel Calhoun, and it's like, we've talked about him, and it's like, he keeps coming back to Tennessee. He keeps coming back to Tennessee. For me, with Cam Franklin, Miami's that dark horse. He keeps getting back down to Miami slowly. It's like, why is it? He doesn't feel like a Miami kid. But I think they're in it more so than people think. And because of that, I think this could go on a little longer, like AP said. Now, if it's Cam canceling the LSU visit, I think that's very interesting.
Brent, a couple weeks ago in Nashville at the On3 NIL event series, AP had a chance to catch up with Caleb Beasley, longtime commit for Tennessee. And he talked about how he and Jake Merklinger, both those guys were on campus this past weekend, but he talked about how those two guys were kind of the leaders in the group, right? But then you had Caleb Beasley going over here, going on this visit and signing up for this visit and all that. But this weekend he said, hey, I'm done. This is home. This is it. And he shut down his recruitment. How big is that for Tennessee, for Caleb Beasley, and for this class to kind of move forward?
Well, I think we all felt like Caleb Beasley was going to end up at Tennessee, even if he took other visits. I think the bigger thing, though, Austin, was if he's going to be a guy who carries some weight.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Hubbard. I know where you're going there. Like, if you carry weight and you are one that is saying, I want to be the face of the defensive side, how much does it kind of look like? I don't know about that for other recruits. If you're out visiting Oklahoma and visiting Notre Dame, cancel the Oklahoma visit, says he's not going to take the visit to Notre Dame anymore. And I know what they're saying over at the Notre Dame site, that, they'll keep swinging and blah, blah, blah. Again, the kid grew up a Vol fan. The dad is a big Vol fan. Like part of this is just the process of him, fielding phone calls and stuff. I've never viewed anybody as a real threat with Caleb Beasley because I think Caleb Beasley wants to be an Orange. Everybody around him wants him an Orange, and I think he'll be an Orange.
Yeah, but to answer your question, Eric, I think it's big because now when he calls and texts other kids and starts talking about Tennessee, there's none of this discussion. Well, why are you taking a visit elsewhere if you're all about Tennessee? So I think this gives him a chance to be a better peer recruiter for Tennessee, along with Boo Carter, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. But in state, it's going to carry more weight with Edwin Spillman now from Caleb Beasley, because if Caleb Beasley is truly locked in and completely done, then he's truly recruiting you to Tennessee. So I do think that it's a big deal for Tennessee, but because he is shutting it down, and I think that gives his voice a lot more pull with other recruits, or at least a lot more influence with other recruits.
In my opinion, I think Caleb Beasley's heard for months, dating back to January, February, not really long after he committed there, that he's the top defensive back target on the board for Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman's been the guy that's continued to prioritize him. He, by the school there at Lipscomb, as he could be, they continue to work him really hard. So I think on the peer recruiting side of things, not that Tennessee's going head to head with Notre Dame necessarily for a lot of people, but I think for him, when he shuts it down and he says, hey, look, I've been told for months, I was the top defensive back target for Notre Dame. There's all the opportunity in the world there to play for a defensive-minded head coach, but I want to stay here. I want to play for Tennessee. I think it just carries that much more weight.
Obviously, only a limited amount of time on the podcast. We can talk recruiting for a lot longer, but AP, Matt, any of the other highlights, things from this weekend that are worth mentioning right now? Then obviously a big-time weekend coming up, even a bigger group to wrap up official visits for the month of June.
Well, the Tennessee leaves the weekend in a great spot for Braylon Staley, a wide receiver from Aiken, South Carolina. They leave the weekend in a great spot for Jordan Burns, linebacker from Pace down in Atlanta. This weekend, they'll host linebacker Tylen Singleton, who comes to town. I like where Tennessee's at there. I know a few national people, still love LSU, but I really kind of like where Tennessee's at entering the weekend. And Matt, all eyes are going to be on Mike Matthews and Amari Jefferson, the two wide receivers. And then does Bennett Warren make it in? Tennessee's got to find an offensive tackle. That's a point of contention for me. If the offensive line, or especially the offensive tackle recruiting, it's just not been great. And they've got to find some tackle bodies. And right now the numbers are dwindling, and they've got to figure out who it is. Is it Bennett Warren? I guess we'll find out if he makes it in this weekend, if Tennessee can do anything there.
Yeah, I think Bennett Warren, you have to try to find a way to get him here this weekend. He's important right now. I know he's not a name that's been thrown up a lot, but he's important. Mike Matthews and Amari Jefferson, they're going to they're going to be the talk of the weekend. I think you look elsewhere, William Satterwhite and Ronan O'Connell are both here. Tennessee's trying to continue to show well in both of those recruitments. Right up there trying to close those out and coming out of the month of June. Quintavious Johnson set to be here, a guy that Tennessee seems to like a pretty good bit on the defensive line, as they're going to continue to try to show well there. Clemson recently entered the mix. Georgia's still a factor there. So another big time battle, but it's another massive, massive weekend for Tennessee on the recruiting front.
And Braylon Russell, the big back from Arkansas, rolls to town this weekend. He's coming off that Arkansas visit. They're trying to get him back in the boat. He was once committed to the Hogs. The fact he's still coming on that visit tells me Tennessee's got a real shot to be the team that Braylon Russell picks on July 14th, which is his birthday, which is the day he will pull the trigger. But, again, you already have Peyton Lewis. You see him right there in this class. They would love to add a big back like Braylon Russell, who's got some twitch to him in this class. And, the Volquest.com podcast After Dark, Eric Kane's already got the lights changing down there. This is some neat stuff.
I think somebody forgot to pay the power bill here at the Holiday Inn Express. The lights just went off.
Hey, let me ask. I know we're running out of time here, but since I got on late and I haven't had a chance to talk, I do want to ask a couple of questions here. Matt and Austin, the Johnson kid. Where you're looking at where Tennessee's at on the defensive line. I know we're talking about Kamarion Franklin. I know we're talking about Williams. But some of these other guys are coming off the board, right? Like how much more important is a guy like Johnson this weekend than he was 3 or 4 weeks ago in terms of Tennessee's defensive line recruiting, Matt?
Yeah, I think you hit it right there. Some of these other guys are coming off the board. Amaris Williams was supposed to be here this weekend, committed to Florida during that visit last weekend. So I think, again, Quintavious Johnson's that much more important this weekend. As Tennessee continues to work through the cycle there, he's a guy that, he's been kind of quiet there at Mays High School. Most of the kids that come out of Mays High School are pretty quiet, not very active on social media. Don't really get into the visit hype and talk a lot after visits. But look at the measurables there. 6'5", 255. He moves and does some things well. Kind of reminds me of a Tyree Weathersby at this stage. You can see the motor, you can see the potential. There's need for refinement, but there's plenty of room to grow, and the ceiling's really high. So I think this is an important visit for him this weekend, and an important, opportunity for Tennessee to continue to show well with him.
Huge last couple weekends here for Tennessee in terms of recruiting as they try to wrap up the this class of 2024, at least these official visits. Of course, it'll go on until signing day in December. And you can find it all the coverage over at Volquest.com. Nobody does it better than Austin Price and Matt Ray.